Today on the Worship Anywhere broadcast, we have a very special presentation because guess what? It's Easter. We're going to talk about why Jesus' death matters and what hope we have in a world where people still die. Thanks for joining us. I'm Pastor Matt, and this is a special Easter Worship Anywhere. Centuries ago, they started saying, "He is risen" on Easter morning. And then the response is, "He is risen indeed." And so if you're walking around your house today and kind of a fun call and response with your kids, "He is risen indeed." Let that be your Easter mantra because it's a great day. It's an amazing moment during the year where we pause to acknowledge that there is something stronger than death, that there is something more hopeful than we can even understand. And the Easter message is meant to give us that hope. So thanks for being with us today, and thanks for watching wherever you're watching from. I hope you've enjoyed if you're local to North Dakota, I hope you've enjoyed the weather this last week. If you're not local to North Dakota, lucky you, because it's been a tough blizzardy week for us here, and we're looking forward to spring more than ever. And Easter is kind of that starting point. I'm going to show you a quick preview of the new series that we're starting today as part of our Easter celebration. Check this out. We just really believe it's surprises that you don't have to have all the answers. God doesn't give us all the answers. The Bible doesn't tell us a lot of things that it could, because it tells us the most important things that matter. And so we're starting a series called Good Questions, where we're asking you to help us answer the questions that people like you are feeling, wondering about, or wrestling with. And today we're going to introduce this series by reassuring you that questions aren't just something that might happen. They do happen, and they must happen for us to have a healthy relationship with God and other people. By the way, as you look at this slide right here, you'll see a text prompt that you'll see throughout the message. Text the word "question" to that number, and we will incorporate as many as we can in our next series each week. So 701-380-8210, text the word "question," and you're going to get a survey back that tells you, allows you to ask your question, or you can select from a range of topics that might interest you. Thanks in advance for sharing your input, your feedback, and the things you're wondering about, because I think it's actually a very brave thing. So I really appreciate it as you help us frame our next series. Question I want to ask today, given that it's Easter, is how did Jesus defeat death if we still die? Isn't that kind of a silly question? But it's worth asking. How does Jesus defeat death if we still die? One possible way is to say that he didn't, right? People still die. So whatever we're talking about for Easter, clearly it's just kind of a fairy tale that makes us feel good. But today we're going to lean into it a little farther than that, and we're going to get at the idea of something big happened on that specific day that at least gives some answers to this question. John chapter 20, let's check it out. John chapter 20 is the Easter story in the Gospel of John. Each of the different Gospels have their own kind of camera angle on the resurrection story, but John 20 is the one we're going to look at today. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene, a close friend of Jesus, a woman who followed him along with his disciples, had a very deep sense of gratitude for what he did for her and setting her free from the evil that was keeping her shackled in life. She was one of the first ones to the tomb on Easter morning because she wanted to pay her respects. She went to the tomb before the sun came up. And she saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved. We think that disciple is John, a young disciple John. who writes this gospel. He names himself as the one Jesus loved. I don't think it's too congratulatory. I don't think he's bragging here because he doesn't name himself. I think he sort of wants us to see ourselves in that position. So whenever you see the disciple whom Jesus loved, you have the author's permission to incorporate yourself in that position. See yourself in the story. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and says, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." She doesn't go in. She just sees the stone rolled away, which was not supposed to happen. And so she runs and gets Simon and John, we presume. So, verse 3, Peter and the other disciple, again, doesn't name him, maybe inviting you to see yourself running in this foot race, started for the tomb. Both of them were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. No one's gone in yet. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, verse 8, the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. Hold on here. Hold on. Hold the horses, hold the phone. What does he believe? It's easy just to read right past this, but does he believe Jesus isn't there? Does he believe Jesus' body was stolen? He believed what? Yep, he's not here. That's his faith right now. The tomb is empty is his faith. That's all he knows. He doesn't have any theology. He doesn't know any Bible verses. He doesn't have any songs memorized about Jesus. He just has a tomb that's not got a body in it. And that counts as believing. Look at verse 9. It says, they still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back where they were staying. Questions are part of believing. It says they believed but didn't understand. Do you realize what amazing news that is? That means you may have faith that something profound happened on Easter, but not exactly know how biologically God resurrected his son. You might believe that the tomb was empty, but not theologically understand how exactly all of the details work together to make that the payment in full for God's wrath upon our sin paid on the cross, and the resurrection, and how that whole philosophically, theologically works together. You may not be able to answer every criticism that comes. You may not be able to read a book written by a scholar who doesn't believe it and answer those questions. But here's the deal. The first disciples that got to the tomb believed and didn't understand. They just believed. Now, that's not to say they didn't even go to the tomb and bother. They did everything they could to understand as much as they could, but they trusted whatever God showed them was enough at the time. And God says, you know what, I'm not going to expect from you faith that is so great that you understand everything perfectly. I'm going to just assume, I'm going to accept that if you believe the basic principle that Jesus isn't dead anymore, that's faith. Whether you can explain everything or not, questions are part of believing. They believed and didn't understand. In other words, that means this: faith is impossible. I would take it one step farther and say faith is impossible without doubts and questions. Otherwise, if you just have Jesus standing in front of you every day saying, by the way, I'm real, can I make you some toast? You don't really have faith, do you? You have sight. Faith, Scripture says in Hebrews, says faith is the conviction of things that we hope for. It's being sure about what we don't see. So for some reason, God wants there to be a relationship where we lean into things we believe to be true without having certainty, because certainty is a matter of facts and things I can prove. But relationships don't work that way. Here, for example, let's say you go out on a date with somebody, and you want to get to know that person. You're single, but you'd like to have that special someone in your life, and you sit down, and the only rule is that you have to be sure of everything you think, you can't have any doubts, and you can't ask any questions to one another. What kind of relationship is that going to be? What kind of date is it going to be? Do you think you'd even have a second date after that? Relationships simply don't work with facts alone. They work with vulnerability. They work with risk. They work with opening up to things I don't understand. They work with me looking at someone else and trying to open up to their story, a story I don't know yet. That requires vulnerability and risk and a willingness to reveal things about myself too. Try dating without questions and you realize it doesn't go very well. You just sit there and assert yourself like, I know everything, and the relationship suffers because faith is a relationship. It's the same way. God makes himself known to us in Jesus, and the disciples, as they pursue what Easter means, they're full of questions. They don't understand everything. And Mary summarizes and epitomizes this more than any. Look at verse 11. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, even angels ask questions. Woman, why are you crying? Relationships require interaction based on questions. That's how intimacy is shared. That's how knowledge is shared. That's how we understand each other's stories. That's how we communicate our concerns, our hurts, our fears. Why are you crying? Her answer, they have taken my Lord away. And she said, and I don't know where they have put him. Revealing something she doesn't know takes courage and vulnerability. At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. Full of questions, doesn't have all the answers. That is how we find Mary. And now we continue. Jesus asked her, same question, woman, why are you crying? Even Jesus asks questions. Even Jesus, in an interaction with someone else, doesn't simply assert answers, but he asks questions. And they ask another one, who is it that you're looking for? Thinking he was the gardener. I love how Jesus is mistaking for a guy with a garden hoe. She said, sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will get him. Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned to him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. He didn't give her an answer. He didn't tell her where the body was. He didn't explain everything that happened. He just called her name. He leaned in and got her attention. She wasn't even looking at him, if you notice. She just hears his voice. Even though she's known this guy for years, he saved her life. She hears the same man's voice, but her concept of life is so final when it comes to death that she doesn't even open up to the possibility that that's Jesus. Jesus is dead. His body must be stolen. Whoever this is must be the gardener. But then the gardener calls out her name. Got her attention and made a connection. See, God doesn't give us all the answers, does he? But he does offer us himself. When you think of Jesus, you might think of a lot of things. Good teacher, nice guy, powerful healer. Have you ever thought of Jesus as God saying, here you go. I'm going to come down from my heavenly throne and present myself to you in the flesh. I'm going to let you get to know me. I'm going to let you see what God would do in real time. And I'm going to suffer, offer my body on the cross for your salvation and your forgiveness, to win you back into a intimate, vulnerable, trusting relationship with me. He offers us himself. Doesn't tell us everything, tells us what we need to know. Jesus said, don't hold on to me. When she realized it was him, she probably was tempted to grab him or hug him or say, we're going to my house to eat dinner. I'm not letting you out of my sight again. But he said, don't hold on to me, for I've not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, she's got a job to do besides just hanging on to Jesus. I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. And she told him that he had said these things to her. So here again, Mary doesn't have all the answers. She just has Jesus, who offered himself to her and made that connection with her by calling out her name. There's a lot she doesn't know. But for Jesus, that's enough. He says, now you can represent me. I want you to go and tell others about me. You don't have to be a scholar, a Bible teacher, a pastor to represent God well. You just have to know his name and have a relationship with him where you're honest and vulnerable about who you are and your needs before him, and honest with others that you found the hope of the empty tomb. If you don't think you can represent God or speak for him or act on his behalf, just remember, what Mary actually knew at that point was less than you know. She just knew that Jesus wasn't dead, and her job was to go and tell people. God uses imperfect people who don't understand everything to share his message. Knowing him is enough. You don't have to have all the answers. In fact, people get annoyed with us when we try to have all the answers, don't they? Do you know that person that thinks they have to have all the answers? Sometimes that's me, sorry. Maybe that's you sometimes too. But you know that other person that we really don't like being around, who thinks they have all the answers, and all they do is just assert that they know the truth, they know better, they know more than you, they have a better story than yours. It's like, good grief. Stop trying to one-up everybody. God uses imperfect people who don't understand everything to represent him and share his message. He wants it that way, so we don't pretend to be God ourselves, and that we give other people hope that I don't have to have everything figured out either. I can just follow him. I can just call him my Lord. I can talk to him and be honest with his people about where I'm at, so I can take one baby step at a time. Knowing him is enough. So ask your questions, but it's okay if you don't have everything figured out. One of the songs we're going to sing in our Easter gatherings on Easter Sunday talks about death being arrested. I'm circling back now to the initial question that we asked. Did Jesus really defeat death if people still die? That was something the early church really struggled with. Everybody fell in love with Jesus, they met Jesus, they accepted Jesus, and then people started dying. They're like, wait a minute, I thought Jesus defeated death, and now we're dying? When we sang that song, though, death was arrested and my life began. I like that word a lot. You see, if you think about the definition of arrest, one definition is to stop something. If your heart arrests, it is stopped. If cardiac arrest. If a epidemic is arrested, it is stopped. It no longer is spreading and causing problems. And Jesus' death has not yet arrested death completely. People still die. We look at our lives and say, I'm going to die someday. My life is finite. And if that's the only definition we have for what Jesus could do to death, just make sure that no one ever dies again, we're missing out. But there is a second definition to arrest, and it's this: to seize, to take into custody, legally in particular. Now, if you hold on to that one, it works. Death has been taken into custody. It's not dead yet. Any more than a criminal sitting in a jail cell is executed on day one, but something has happened. On Easter Sunday, Jesus did something and fundamentally changed death by putting it in a cage and setting its trial date and putting it under confinement so that it no longer has say and control over your and my ultimate destiny. Jesus arrested death, took it into custody, seized it. So it may continue to live, it may continue to bear its dark fruit, but its days are numbered and its power is limited. God proved in the empty tomb that he's in charge and that death does not define him or his people. In other words, death isn't dead yet, but it is in God's custody and it no longer controls you. And why do you need to hear that? Most of us live without even knowing it, totally controlled by the fear of death. Now, for you, it might be looking at body fat in the wrong locations. And like, as I age, I don't want to get fatter. I heard one person say, hey, as you age, you either get fitter or fatter. What's it going to be? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm all about staying healthy. But the fear of aging and bodies changing naturally as we age has led to a multi-billion-dollar industry of people trying to just not look like they age one single day. And if you see someone that looks older, you say, ooh, they've aged. It's almost like, well, they're closer to death. And if I can just ward off even the appearance of aging, I can maybe avoid dying, or I can maybe look like I'm not as old as I am. And I think there's a real kind of way that we almost try to guard ourselves against something that's obviously going to happen. You can do this when you're young. You can try to stay young and not grow older in certain ways of developing maturity and developing responsibility and developing self-control, investing in relationships that aren't just fun but are also in give you wisdom and positive influences. Sometimes we just want to just be young and have fun and not think about growing up. And I think underneath the surface there is this fear. I want to be as far away from the end of my life as possible. So I'm going to push towards the young, easy, fun, no responsibilities. But if you're not afraid of death anymore, you might take that responsibility. You might be the parent that sticks around. You might hold up in a challenging relationship or job. Because this life isn't all there is for you. There is hope even beyond the grave. So I don't need to demand my way as if I'm entitled to things going a certain way at any given moment. I'm not entitled to look a certain way. I'm not entitled to feel a certain way. I get to live, and it gets to be okay if I don't have it all figured out and if everything doesn't work just perfectly, because I don't have all my eggs. I'll have my Easter eggs in this life basket. Death isn't dead yet, but it is in God's custody, and it no longer controls you. As we move on from Easter, we're going to be thinking about all the ways that we can apply the good news of Jesus to everyday life. And I want you to once again feel more than free, feel encouraged to text a question, whether it has to do with Easter or God or life or decisions or relationships, maybe a sexuality or some of the politics that seep into how we see things in life. Whatever you want to talk about, just let us know. We'll get to as many as we can in ways that we feel like are healthy for our community. And we just want you to be honest about your questions, because again, questions are part of faith, because faith is a relationship. He is risen, my friends. He is risen indeed. And let's celebrate the freedom that we have in the resurrected Christ by not needing to be perfect, not needing to have all the answers, but by being confident of only this, that God has offered himself to us on the cross and then raised from the dead to proclaim victory over death, which is still around, but on borrowed time, because death has been arrested. God bless you guys. Happy Easter. See you soon.
There's a peace I've come to know, though my heart and flesh may fail. There's an anchor for my soul. I can say it is well. Jesus has overcome, and the grave is overwhelmed. The victory is won. He is risen from the dead, and I will rise when he calls my name. No more sorrow, walls